Space. The final frontier. Few endeavours are more intensely difficult, expensive, and dangerous than unlocking the mysteries of the cosmos. Ever since man set his sights on realising his interstellar dreams, the path to knowledge has been fraught with huge trials and tribulations. Like beating the Soviets in the space race or putting up with women crying over a Hawaiian shirt. But despite all of the probes, billions of dollars, and lives that have been spent over the years, one surprisingly basic question still hasn't been definitely settled. But NASA must be feeling pretty silly because apparently all it'll take to get to the truth is a small rocket built in a shed with a box of scraps. That's right, there is a starman looking at the sky. He would like to go and see it, and he thinks it would blow our minds. Why? Because the Earth might not be the shape that we've all been led to believe. And he was going to build a rocket in his shed so that he could fly up into space and prove once and for all that the Earth is flat. Of course, something else ended up flat. Mad Mike Hughes. And a comment on this video because it really helps me in the algorithm. Now, I am a very frugally minded fella, and with the ever-expanding nature of the internet, it is very difficult to keep track of all the different payments that you drunkenly made at 4 in the morning and then forgot existed. So, in steps today's sponsor, Rocket Money. Now, I recently found out that money was being taken out of my account every month for an undisclosed pony fan site. That is completely true. I love my writers. But anyway, after the initial panic had subsided, I realised that I had actually signed up for this months ago and had completely forgotten about it. This would have remained hidden if not for Rocket Money. Rocket Money is a financial management service that specialises in optimising your spending habits. In my case, it helped me find forgotten subscriptions that I don't intend on using, and it helped me rid my card of it with only a couple of taps. But in case that is not what you're looking for per se, Rocket Money can also help you with budgeting and reviewing your overall spending habits to help you encourage savings through a smart and sleek spreadsheet that makes me feel like I'm a responsible adult. So, if you want to join over 5 million others and get a piece of this financial action, you need only go to rocketmoney.com/Count Dankula to get started for free. Again, that is rocketmoney.com/Count Dankula to get started for free. Now, back to the video. Mike Hughes lived for going fast. From the tender age of 2 months, he was at car races with his dad, and he started dirt bike racing himself when he was just 12 years old. His passion for racing was so great that he went pro in 1974, and he became the top ice speedway motorbike racer in the United States half a decade later. However, this glory didn't matter to Mike, and he would actually throw the trophies that he won away, because he only cared about the prize money and the girl handing him the trophy. Eventually, Mike moved on to cars, spending the 80s working as a fabricator and body specialist for NASCAR drivers, before moving to Las Vegas in 1994 and trying to qualify for the Winston Cup Series with a car that he built himself from spare parts. We don't know if he succeeded, but he later became a limousine driver while moonlighting as a daredevil, doing stunts with the limo. One of these stunts was a 75-foot limo jump, but that wasn't enough. On the 28th of September 2002, Mike went over a ramp and jumped 103 feet in his limo. which was such a feat that the pile of tyres intended to cushion his landing separated as he hit them. So he careened straight into a wall and really injured his back. But it was all worth it because this stunt actually earned him the Guinness World Record for the longest limousine ramp jump. This would be far from the last of Mike's injuries, but he made peace with that very early in his career, saying, "Sometimes I feel like the cartoon character Wile E. Coyote when he suddenly runs off a cliff. But it's the price I pay for a life that's not boring." Therefore, Mike was undeterred by the prospect of injuring himself as he tried to break his record and do 125 feet the following year. However, he didn't make it. But on the bright side, he did flip the limo over at 65 miles per hour before hitting the tyres, which must have been cool as fuck. And while that sounds like an even worse snafu than the tyres separating on impact, Mike was actually completely fine afterwards, because he had covered himself in bubble wrap. Now, I don't know if that would have provided very much protection at those speeds, but pop off, I guess. Even though Mike failed to break his own world record, he still has the one that he set to this day, and will probably hold on to it for the foreseeable future. Because, you see, this world record only exists on account of Mike contacting the record keepers and asking them if they wanted to put it in. Because who the fuck is wild enough to look at a limo and go, "I could totally jump in you"? Though, to be fair, this is certainly one of the more sensible things that Mike did. And in doing so, he earned himself a bit of a reputation, earning him the title of the world's most famous limo driver. Mike then went on to ride this wave of clout from coast to coast as he embarked on a more low-key stunt, a cross-country trip across the US to measure its curvature. Apparently, Aristotle and Eratosthenes might have missed something, but we'll get into why later. Out of the limo, Mike also tried to recreate Evel Knievel's failed Snake River Canyon jump, seemingly out of a desire for one-upmanship. Mike wasn't actually a fan of the legendary Daredevil, dismissing him as an average stunt guy. He stole his look from Elvis. And if there is anything that provides solid motivation, it's an extremely petty and one-sided beef. So Mike locked the fuck in and spent 1,500 hours teaching himself how to build a rocket that could generate enough thrust to mog Knievel and make the jump. After all, how hard can it be? It's not rocket science. This, however, was a lot more difficult than he expected, so Mike needed a teacher. Fortunately, Mike's adventures in Rocketeering drew the attention of one Waldo Stakes, a self-taught designer of rocket-powered cars and boats for the explicit purpose of breaking speed records. Very well known in the sphere, Stakes would very often receive plenty of calls from would-be Rocketeers. But Mike stood out for his determination to do absolutely everything himself. Impressed, Stakes gave Mike a call in 2008. He saw the rocket that he had built for the canyon jump, and he told Mike that it would fucking kill him. So in the end, the jump didn't happen for boring logistical reasons, but maybe the real stunt was the friends that we made along the way, as the planning stage kickstarted a long and glorious partnership. As Mike's chief engineer and right-hand man, Stakes was all in on Mike's vision, which was, and I quote, "The idea was to make Mike the greatest daredevil of all time. Undisputed. He went to space and we built it in our backyard. The ability to build this stuff is never beyond your reach." And so, Mike lived and worked with his 4 cats on Stakes' property near Apple Valley. It was called El Ranchito Raquete, or the Rocket Ranch. It is from here that the pair worked on something a little bit more ambitious than a canyon jump. Instead of going forward, Mike was looking to go up. Way, way up. Unfortunately, however, Mike was working on a budget and he didn't have access to any NASA scientists or equipment. So he had to design a rocket that would run on the cheapest fuel that he could use. Water. That's right, Mike decided to play Kerbal Space Program on Steam. The idea is that a big tank of water is superheated to really high pressure, which is then released, and all of the steam is ejected through the rocket's nozzle, generating the thrust needed to get into the air. And the best part is that, and I quote, "There is no fuel cost, it's water." The other advantage is that since the main propulsion system of the rocket would be a ramp, the Federal Aviation Administration determined that it wouldn't exactly be a rocket launch, which helped a lot with getting around safety reviews and regulations, as long as Mike kept local safety officials posted. And it's just as well that Mike could play fast and loose with regulations because his designs were refined by trial and error. And if you think that sounds really fucking dangerous, Mike agreed, saying, "You don't get a lot of second chances though in the rocket business." On the 30th of January 2014, Mike was in Arizona ready for his first outing. In a nod to how he got his start, Mike named his first rocket the X2 Sky Limo, which flew 1,374 feet in the air. The rocket launched off course, flying off to the side, and caused a disorientated Mike to pull the chutes early, which shredded the parachutes, resulting in a crash landing after just 11 seconds in the air. Also, 2 of the parachutes were over 20 fucking years old, and one of them failed to open. This rocket was absolutely fucking scuffed. Mike got so rattled by G-forces that he collapsed as soon as he got back to the ground. He then took 3 days to recover, and he had to walk with a Zimmer frame for a few weeks. Looking back on the experience, Mike reflected, "Yeah, it was a scary moment. I had never parachuted before." But it didn't seem to scare him that much because he was straight back to rocketeering as soon as he could walk again. But why? Other than being, pretty fucking fun, why was Mike so hellbent on blasting himself into the sky? Well, he wanted to get a good look at the Earth. But why? Well, because he thought that it was frisbee-shaped with a big ice wall keeping the oceans in. As he explained himself, "I believe in the geocentric flat Earth model. I'm not going to take anyone else's word for it. I'm going to build my own rocket right here and see it with my own eyes. What shape this world we live on is." Obviously, this is complete and absolute shite. Flat Earth is just a bitter psyop by the infamous terrorist organisation, the Itty Bitty Titty Committee. They're just projecting their jealousy on all of us. Real planets have curves. I mean, look at the Earth. Look at how big and round that is. Despite his belief, Mike didn't know why there would be a big conspiracy and cover-up to convince everyone of round Earth. But he really wanted to find out. And he was so curious that he turned out to be surprisingly open-minded, and, unlike his fellow flat earthers, willing to accept the possibility of a round Earth. As he explained when outlining his mission, "I expect to see a flat disc up there. I don't have an agenda. If it's a round Earth or a ball, I'm going to come down and say, 'Hey guys, I'm bad, it's a ball,' okay?" So, even if he was proven wrong, Mike was perfectly happy to fly up there and ponder the orb. But Mike's process of getting up there would prove to be very, very interesting because, and I quote, "I don't believe in science. I know about aerodynamics and fluid dynamics and how things move through the air, about the certain size of rocket nozzles and thrust, but that's not science. That's just formula. There is no difference between science and science fiction. Okay. Mike also didn't believe in gravity, even though that would probably be a very useful thing for a Rocketeer to believe in. Also, Mike and gravity were gonna fucking meet one day, but we'll get into that later. Also, Mike had very little time for his peers in the space field, having had a few things to say about Elon Musk.
I don't call it SpaceX, I call it FlakeX. Elon's a brilliant man, okay? I have a problem with the world being run by people from tech. I don't need to put a Tesla up in space now. No, I don't do it.
Mike also derided John Glenn and Neil Armstrong as Freemasons, and he accused them of being at, and I quote, the roots of the deception. While Glenn was actually a Freemason, Armstrong wasn't. But Buzz Aldrin was. Make of that what you will. But it does make sense that Mike would think so little of everyone else in his field, because while they clearly didn't know what the fuck they were talking about, Mike was half right. The Earth is not flat. But it used to be until man's hubris caused untold devastation that literally reshaped the world as we know it. You see, thousands and thousands of years ago, the mightiest and proudest of the great race of men lived on an island named Numenor, and as a reward from the Valar for their role in winning the great wars of the First Age, with the only caveat being a ban against sailing into the West. So we now know why Mike was so keen on blasting into space. And in 2016, it was time to gear up for a second launch. And to help get his next rocket built, Mike set up a fundraiser with a goal of $150,000. And he raised $310. Luckily, his recent coming out as a flat earther provided a much-needed source of support. The Flat Earth Society and Platist community sponsored him, providing a windfall of $7,875. And Mike seemed aware of the magnitude of his appointment as their champion, as he declared, "I am their best hope. I am the best hope to prove the flat earth." And Mike wasn't going to let them down, setting in motion a plan to fly 62 miles into the sky just above the Kármán line, which is considered to be the point where the sky ends and space begins. This altitude will be more than enough to, as he puts it, shut the door on this ball Earth, as he will be able to see the curvature or lack thereof with his own eyes and take pictures because, and I quote, "I don't want to take anyone else's word for it. I don't know if the world is flat or round." Mike and Stakes had to create something pretty big if they wanted to get Mike up that high, and the planned design was what they dubbed a rock-un, a portmanteau of rocket and balloon. The idea was that the balloon would float Mike 20 miles up before the hydrogen peroxide-powered rocket detaches and blasts him the rest of the way. And at the apex of his flight, Mike would take his picture before the balloon, a balloon parachute hybrid, would be inflated by a helium supply, getting Mike safely back down to Earth. Despite this safety measure, which would cost $300,000 to prepare, the idea was so ludicrously harebrained that Stakes calculated the odds of Mike surviving to be just 50-50. Which, well, what's the most you've ever lost in a coin toss? However, Mike was just built different, because not only was he completely unbothered by this, he was actually really excited. He revelled in the idea of all of the fame it would bring him, since, and I quote, "more people will watch this than the supposed moon landing." Moving on, Mike's mission to the Carmen line and to see Great Atuine's head attracted a fair amount of attention. Enough that the Science Channel actually kept tabs on his progress for a documentary series titled Homemade Astronauts, which followed Mike and 2 other teams of self-funded Rocketeers to get as close to the Carmen line as possible. And I can imagine that the rocket that Mike put together, in addition to his personality, made for some pretty good television. And the star of the show was Liberty One, a rickety thing that, and I quote, wants to kill you in 10 different ways. It was mostly put together in Mike's back garden out of spare parts and salvage. The rocket nozzle used to be an aircraft air filter, much of the aluminium was found in metal shops, the research flat earth paint job was done with cheap paint, and the launch ramp was made out of a converted camper van that Mike bought on Craigslist for $1,500. Unsurprisingly, it actually needed repairing after it broke down in Mike's driveway. All in, Liberty One cost about $20,000. And for an idea of how Mike tried to cut costs as much as possible, he bought used parachutes for about $179 on eBay. If anything, surely you would splurge a little bit on the fucking parachutes. But to be fair, the rocket had to be as cheap as possible because Mike wasn't a Rocketeer by trade. He was still just a limo driver making $15 an hour plus tips. But it was a common misconception that, and I quote, "People think I'm rich and I'm making all this money off these rocket launches. Hell, I'm on Medicaid." Liberty One was supposed to launch on the 25th of November 2017, but it ended up being delayed to the 2nd of December because the Bureau of Land Management wasn't happy with Mike's flight path going over public land. This issue became quite a thorn in the side and got the launch further delayed into 2018. Until Mike moved the launch site 6 kilometres onto private property and adjusted the flight path to a tighter, more vertical arc. This should have been enough to appease the authorities, but the BLM continued to try and bury him under paperwork, seemingly determined to make sure that he didn't do nothing. But a determined Mike persisted, saying that, "I'm a daredevil, I'm not much for authority or rules." In the end, Mike decided to just completely rip off a New Vegas quest line by blasting off over a ghost town in the Mojave Desert named Amboy, located near Highway 247, about 120 miles northeast of Los Angeles, which loosely inspired Radiator Springs from Cars. In return for permission to do so from the owner, Albert Okura, Mike was kind enough to put the name of his restaurant chain, Juan Polo, on the fin of his rocket. Even though Okura was just happy to have him there, saying, and I quote, "He is a true daredevil, and I want to be part of it." But while the location was locked in, trying to get Mike in the air continued to be a nightmare, as a launch attempt on the 3rd of February had failed. High winds threatened yet another postponement, but on the 24th of March 2018, Mike finally blasted off. With 70 gallons of heated water in the tank, the rocket shot up at 340 psi, reaching a speed of 350 miles per hour and a height of 1,875 feet, and then landing a mile away from where he originally launched. Despite deploying 2 parachutes and designing the rocket's nose to break in 2 places on impact like a car's crumple zone, Mike's landing wasn't as soft as he would have liked, as his bravery was rewarded with compressed vertebra. However, he wasn't seriously injured, and in true Mike fashion, he was perfectly happy with how everything turned out, by saying, "Am I glad I did it? Yeah, I guess. I'll feel it in the morning, I won't be able to get out of bed, but at least I can go home and have dinner and see my cats tonight." While Mike made it down safely, the mission sounds like a massive failure, doesn't it? I mean, he only undershot his target by 325,485 feet. As you would expect, Mike's antics attracted much ridicule, especially due to his motivations. The most common criticism pointed out that Mike could have gotten much, much higher, much more safely, and for much, much cheaper by simply getting on a fucking plane, where a view of the Earth's curvature with the naked eye is very well documented. A valid point? Nah, I don't think so. For one, fuck you, that's boring, and also these rocket launches aren't actually serious test runs for the trip to space, but merely a proof of concept. Or rather, proof of Mike's seriousness about actually taking the risk needed to complete the mission. As he was, and I quote, "tired of people saying I chickened out and didn't build a rocket. I'm tired of that stuff. I manned up and did it." This whole project was also a way of raising awareness of flat Earth and Mike's larger goal, in addition to getting people down the rabbit hole and questioning everything. As one of Mike's friends, Pioneer Pat, put it,
yeah, I think that really what we're doing right here, in so many words, is getting people to think and ask a question one way or the other, and just ponder the possibilities of things. And this whole endeavor is about possibilities. It's really a symbol of freedom and liberty. It's about being able to kind of blaze a trail, so to speak, and when it comes to some of these so-called esoteric ideas or thoughts, we could go back to like things like the Federal Reserve that was initiated in 1913, and what was that all about, and how does it impact our lives today, and different things like the Organic Constitution or the Act of 1871 and those type of things, right, which aren't really taught in school. So
is it weird that all of that made a surprising amount of sense to me? Any enemy of the Federal Reserve is a friend of mine. The hope was also that this awareness would help Mike raise the $2 million that it would cost to build the Rockoon that he would need to reach the Kármán line. Surely he could just do the whole trip more cheaply and safely in a balloon, like Felix Baumgartner, the human Beyblade, did when Red Bull inexplicably didn't give him wings. But where's the fun in that? Rockets are fucking cool, and there were balloons planned for before and afterwards. Rockets were just Mike's style. Let the man enjoy himself. Say what you will, but the publicity stunts worked. As Mike prepared for his 2018 launch, he was followed by a crew filming a documentary titled Rocket Man: Mad Mike's Mission to Prove the Flat Earth, which was released in 2019. Obviously, the filmmakers would have gotten to know Mike really quite well while making it, and their assessment was as follows. He was a lonely guy. He had a lot of time to surf YouTube, and he went down the YouTube rabbit hole and developed some weird beliefs. Clearly, the filmmakers didn't really agree with Mike's earth truthing, but they seemed to like him, and they were really worried about the danger of the big launch that was to be the big climax of their documentary. They said, when we were filming it, we were thinking to ourselves, wow, this is dangerous. I think that's what hit us then and there. This is completely dangerous. And luckily, it didn't turn out that way for us that day. But, of course, the launch went as successfully as one could expect, and Mike was mostly fine. So, in the end, everyone was really happy with the result of the launch, especially the filmmakers who said, "I love that ending," where he was able to be successful. Regardless of what happened, he still built a rocket and he launched a rocket. And when it comes down to it, he deserves kudos for that. While the documentary would have been a great platform for Mike to get his message out there, others wanted to mine him for sound bites. And by God did Mike deliver. For instance, in a 2018 Associated Press interview, Mike expressed an interest in using the clout from successfully launching into space to run for governor of California. At the end of that year, he also appeared in a segment on Tosh.0, in which he kept getting distracted and talking about pulling women and fucking his exes for some reason.
When I used to pick up women in clubs, I used to use neurolinguistics, which is just study of eye patterns and body movements. Okay. I would use that, but I would use the GUI theory, and that is go ugly early. You don't have to buy them any drinks, and you always get laid by 10 o'clock that night. Then you can go back on again.
Seriously, watch the whole interview. Mike does sound like he would have been a fucking riot to get drunk with. But yeah, the estranged family part does explain a lot. This whole mission might have just been the greatest midlife crisis of all time. Ironically, Mike always seemed very down to earth. Sometimes very, very quickly, but again, we'll get into that later. And say what you will about his antics, he was clearly at least a bit self-aware, and he had a really good sense of humour. Up to a point. In 2019, Logan Paul did the least controversial thing that he ever did. He came out as a flat earther and attended the Flat Earth International Conference in Denver. And while there, he interacted with and interviewed a number of flat earthers for a documentary titled Flat Earth to the Edge and Back. And of course, Mike was there and gave an interview.
This guy shot himself out of a rocket by himself without NASA. This is incredible.
I expect to see a flat disc up there.
Okay, why did you do that?
Just to prove it could be done.
You're a maverick. We gotta get you some merch.
Logan Paul seemed serious about his new flat earth beliefs and even gave a speech at the conference. However, the entire thing turned out to be a troll. When the video went up, it quickly turned out to be a mockumentary, with the twist ending being that Logan Paul doesn't actually believe in flat earth at all. Now, credit where it's due, that is pretty funny. However, this angered Mike, who flew into a rage, and he sued Logan Paul, seeking $500,000 for allegedly using his image under false pretenses. His main complaint was that, and I quote, "He parodied everybody. He used my image and I never signed a release. I was never told what this thing was for. In fact, when he interviewed me, I didn't know who the guy was. I didn't find out until later that it was Logan Paul, some YouTube guy, which still didn't mean nothing to me. After this movie comes out, you will find out he staged half of it." Mike seemed very confident that he could win because he seemed to have a fair amount of experience in the field of suing people, saying, "I have a lot of court cases going on. I'm not one to screw with when I get pissed off. I know how to shut you down. Basically, I have claimed legal entities for very famous people. They can't even exist, which are Barack Obama, Mark Zuckerberg, Elon Musk, Warren Edward Buffett. I own the legal entities that they are operating under. They know this. I haven't filed the claims yet. Well, actually, I did about Obama. We're back in court May the 7th. Did he fucking sue Barack Obama for being Barack Obama? Mike also claimed that a lot of courts in San Bernardino actually knew him, and that a few of the judges and bailiffs were friendly with him and followed his work. A lot of courts in Scotland know who I am, and trust me, it's not much of a brag. However, they probably weren't following his work in the way that he had hoped, because he was actually arrested and indicted for extortion over his weird I own who rich people are stunt. But fortunately, he was bailed out by a fan, so he was able to continue his rocketeering. While Mike probably wasn't going to get one over on Logan Paul in the courts, he certainly won sort of a moral victory, because only one of these mavericks had a need for speed. While all of this was going on, Mike was getting ready to blast off for a third time. The target this time was 5,000 feet in the air, which more than doubled his previous altitude. He needed to build his most powerful rocket yet if he wanted to beat his record, and therefore his next creation would be a real challenger. Therefore, a much bigger and much more solid launcher than a converted camper van was required. But luckily, Mike had received a semi-truck as a kind donation. Funding for the project was also provided by HUD, a commitment-free casual dating app whose branding on the rocket reads, "Dating isn't rocket science." They clearly haven't met my fucking writers. Also, the Juan Polo branding was still there for good measure, which I think makes an interesting pairing. Choke one chicken and then eat another. On the 12th of August 2019, a launch was aborted because the water heater that he bought off of Craigslist for $325 developed a fault. Other cheap components also included a $50 nose cone. And the launch suffered constant delays due to mechanical problems and Mike suffering from a bout of heat exhaustion. But on the bright side, this gave Mike plenty of time to continue to spread his message, whatever it was. While his stance on flat Earth was mostly consistent despite the varying degrees of agnosticism, the extent to which this was a top priority motivating his mission was made very unclear by comments such as, "I believe the Earth is flat, but this flat Earth has nothing to do with the steam rocket launches. It never did, it never will, I'm a daredevil." Now, if Mike just wanted to get up into the air for its own sake, that's completely fine. But another thing that got Mike out of bed in the morning was, and I quote, "my personal desire to inspire my fellow Americans to help make this country great again. Trump is the greatest president since there's been a president. I intend to spread the word of MAGA with my homegrown, steam-powered manned rocket. I am the homegrown Rocket Man." On the 22nd of February 2020, Mike and his crew were back in Amboy for the launch. For real this time. That morning, he asked his publicist, Darren Schuster, if the media was going to be there. And he was not disappointed. About 50 to 60 people came to watch, including the Science Channel crew shooting the homemade astronaut show. Mike and co. spent the morning making a bunch of last-minute jury-rigged fixes to a bunch of problems with the rocket, like generator issues and cutting metal away from the launcher to prevent the rocket from clipping against it during the launch. All problems that should have probably been dealt with much, much sooner, but Mike didn't seem bothered by the fact that the rocket still wasn't ready just before blast-off. As he said in an interview, "I am the captain. I am going down with the ship. It's safer that way." In the business, we call this foreshadowing. In the early afternoon, the last-minute adjustments were complete and it was finally go time. Mike climbed the ladder into the rocket, he took his protein pills and put his helmet on. Then, commencing countdown, boiler on. He checked compression, and may God's love be with him. During takeoff, the rocket hit the ladder that Mike had used to climb into it, which ripped off a parachute and knocked the rocket off course, with the sudden lurch to the side most likely knocking Mike unconscious, leaving him unable to pull any of the 3 reserve parachutes. And with no parachutes opening on the way down, Mike was in for a landing that was a bit too bumpy. The rocket crash-landed about half a mile away from the launch pad, smashing into the ground about 400 to 500 miles per hour. And from the relative lack of urgency from Mike's crew as they headed towards the crash site, everyone present could easily guess what had just happened. Officers from San Bernardino's County Sheriff's Department were immediately called out, and it wasn't long before they issued a statement revealing the worst. A man was pronounced deceased after the rocket crashed in the open desert during a rocket launch event. Medical aid was staged for the launch and was on scene immediately. Mike obviously died instantly. But having done so at the age of 64, you would think that he had a good long run, especially after a career as a daredevil. But it could have been longer. Sadly, Mike's death was easily preventable. However, he completely ignored basic safety advice, most crucially, Stake's warnings that he should set up the parachutes to deploy automatically. Mike objected to such an idea, saying that, "I'm a daredevil. If I can't pull the parachutes myself, I deserve what I get." For that same reason, Mike had also insisted on getting into the rocket by the metal ladder that actually knocked the rocket off course. Mike quite literally lived and died by the rule of cool. And while I don't agree with the choices that he made, I respect the hell out of them. And so did Stakes, who, despite the tragic ending, did not regret teaching Mike how to fly. With a hint of pride, he emotionally said, "I want you to remember him jamming through the clouds at damn near the speed of sound. But on top of that, I want you to realise what he was saying. You can do anything. The only person that stops you is you. So get out there and live life." He lived life, man. He lived it to the fullest. He really did. Yeah, well, in his attempts to live life, he is now not living life. Other such tributes came pouring in the aftermath of the crash, with the Science Channel saying, "Our thoughts and prayers go out to Mike Hughes' family and friends during this difficult time. It was always his dream to do this launch, and Science Channel was there to chronicle his journey." And when Homemade Astronauts finally aired in 2021, the whole series was dedicated to him. The Rocketman producers made a long Instagram post paying their respects, poignantly saying, "We didn't know what to expect when we decided to document his unusual life, and we're fully prepared to dismiss him and his crazy ideas. But we ended up going on an incredible adventure, and we gained new perspectives on how people view the world and our place in it. As Carl Sagan said, we should confront ignorance with kindness, something that's not always easy to do, and sorely lacking in today's world. Right now, many are laughing at Mad Mike, but as Mike said, if you can't laugh at me, then you need to get a better sense of humour. No one laughed harder at Mad Mike Hughes than himself. He will be deeply missed." It's amazing how Mike managed to gain the genuine respect of many people who expected to just get a quick laugh out of him before moving on to the next meme. Even I went into this video expecting to go, "Ha ha ha, look at the funny flat earth rocket man" for about 20 minutes, and you can tell by this video's length alone that that's not what happened. The man just had an infectious personality. It didn't take much research before he actually kind of won me over. Mike's death was so shocking that it prompted the Flat Earth Society to say something that was actually true for once. Yesterday, the Flat Earth movement lost a dear friend, Michael Hughes, inventor, daredevil, and self-proclaimed madman, has taken one final leap into the sky in a self-constructed steam-powered rocket as part of a Science Channel series he was to star in. He lost his life in a tragic accident, a Guinness World Record holder for the longest limousine ramp jump. Mike never shied away from controversy and danger. It coursed through his veins. His bold, outspoken attitude will be greatly missed by all. Our thoughts and prayers go out to his family in these trying times. It is my hope that Mike has found whatever it was he was looking for in this crazy world. Godspeed, Michael, you glorious bastard. It does weirdly seem rather fitting that Mad Mike's ashes are actually held in a cocktail shaker at a small museum at Stakes Ranch, which is dedicated to people who did amazing stuff. And what Mike did was clearly amazing. And I like to think that Schuster's statement in the wake of the crash was more than just PR when he said, and I quote, "When God made Mike, he broke the mold. The man was the real deal and lived to push the edge. He wouldn't have gone out any other way. R.I.P." However, this wasn't Schuster's only comment on Mike, because he brought to light the conspiracy theory within the conspiracy theory. That Mike was not actually a flat earther. Rockets are expensive, and who would be gullible enough to fund his hobby? I mean, there are thousands of flat earthers out there all around the globe who would do anything for proof, or at least pay someone who actually has the balls to go and get it for them. If all of them dug deep enough into their sofa cushions, well, that is a fully funded ride into space. And this theory is fairly widespread, so much so that Comedy Central also thought that Mike's flat earthing was a load of tosh, who said as much to Mike's face during the interview.
I believe you don't believe that, and you just want a free trip to space.
A lot of people think that, you know. But I believed in my first wife also, so I don't know.
Now, personally, I'm not sure if Mike's belief was sincere or just part of a broader point. Sure, Mike was a very goofy guy, but he seemed to have been operating on his own level beyond common understanding. And this may have been a 4D chess move towards his own ends. As Mike put it, the flat earth thing is like everything else to me. I just want people to question everything. Question what your congressman is doing, your city council, question what really happened during the Civil War, what happened during 9/11. Hold on a little second, he wants us to question the Civil War. No comment. Schuster, however, insisted that the flat earth thing was just a means to an end for funding and publicity. Though he did admit that Mike was eccentric and believed in some government conspiracies. Also saying he wanted to be a hero. That's what drove him. Stakes concurred with Schuster's assessment that Mike used flat earth to draw attention, though he thought that Mike's belief was sincere. Now, on that note of publicity, a cynical man might draw a similar connection to Mike's MAGA message, but considering some of the other statements that Mike has made, I think he may actually have been our guy as far as politics was concerned. While Mike was a big fan of using rockets to spread his myriad of messages, it wasn't just curiosity about that Mike wanted to instill in people. He also wanted to inspire you. He said, and I quote, "People ask me why I do stuff like this. Basically, it's just to convince people that they can do extraordinary things with their lives." As a daredevil, Mike was a big believer in living life to the fullest. And he wanted to show people that they could do great things at any age and even with a shoestring budget. As he said in the documentary, "We are supposed to come to the end of our lives not with anything left, but with everything exhausted. The tires are blown down, you're out of gasoline, and you are coming to a screeching halt. You know you have done everything you can possibly do." So, in the end, it seems like the main reason why Mike did everything that he did was just because he could. It may have been a long time till crashing down brought us around again to find that Mike wasn't the flat earther that we thought he was at all. Oh no, he was a rocket man. Despite his fun and surprisingly wholesome intentions, it is a sad fact that gravity wasn't the only thing trying to put Mike down. In the wake of his death, there was a lot of mockery from his detractors over the recklessness of his stunts, and of course for his belief in flat earth. There was Darwin Award posting, jokes about him being flatter than the earth, and even a few mainstream news reports with a tone that reeked of the author saying womp womp. What a fucking surprise. Obviously, I'm not one to say too soon or bitch about jokes made in poor taste, but a fair amount of the coverage of Mike's death wasn't exactly the most respectful. Yes, I'm completely aware I have an absolute fucking cheek to complain about that. And you know, all of you meme on him as much as you want. On some level, that is probably what he would have wanted. But he deserved to be treated with at least a bit of, well, gravitas might not be the right word, but you get the idea. However, not every journalist was a journalist about it. Preston Lerner, a journalist who actually witnessed the fatal crash and was sympathetic to Mike, reflected on the tragedy of the ending, expressing guilt for enabling Mike launching himself to his death by giving him the attention he wanted. When he said, "It's easy to ridicule the Mike Hugheses of the world. Have-nothings who gamble their lives on a lottery offering only a microscopic chance of success. Well, of course, he got killed. What did he expect? Well, what did we expect? Why didn't we turn away? Who is more pathetic? The people whose exploits populate YouTube channels filled with videos of appalling crashes and fatal accidents, or the people who consume them as entertainment? There is nothing in the world I could have done to prevent Mike from riding a steam rocket to his death. But I didn't have to be there when it happened. No, I didn't kill Mike, but I was part of the ecosystem that exploited him. And that's on me." It's actually rather interesting to see a journalist actually reckon with the evil of their profession. But for once, I'm going to give the benefit of the doubt. Lerner hadn't done anything wrong by following Mike. He may desperately need to unclutch his fucking pearls, but Mike's death wasn't on him. I can't find a moment where Mike didn't seem fully aware of the fact that what he was doing was completely fucking nuts. And yet, he did it anyway. Sure, he may or may not have wanted to check out the flat earth, and he definitely wanted recognition for his stunts. I mean, who fucking wouldn't? But I think that overall, Mike was just in it for the love of the game. He was just a silly guy filled with a joyous whimsy, and in all of his media appearances, he was always leaning into his kooky side and laughing with everyone that thought his mission was ridiculous. Surely an attention seeker would have taken himself a lot more seriously. Mike clearly fully understood the risks of his hobby, and he didn't take them lightly. It just so happened that being badass was a lot more important to him. Or, as he more fully explained, if you're not scared to death, you're an idiot. It's scary as hell, but none of us are getting out of this world alive. I like to do extraordinary things that no one else can do. And no one in the history of mankind has designed, built, and launched himself in his own rocket. While Mike could very easily still be with us today if he hadn't taken such a fuck it we ball attitude to basic safety concerns or had just foregone the whole pipe dream entirely, Mike went out on his own terms doing what he loved. And despite the ending being undeniably tragic, I can't help rooting for him. I just can't. Is there really a better way to go out than by blasting off in your own rocket? Can you think of any? You can't, because that was cool as fuck. As far as I'm concerned, Mike won. And he knew that he won, because he fully recognised his great underdog appeal when he said, "My story really is incredible. It's got a bunch of storylines. The garage built thing, I'm an older guy, it's out in the middle of nowhere, plus the flat earth. The problem is, it brings out all the nuts also. People questioning everything. It's the downside of all this. It might be a bit rich for Mike of all people to complain about others questioning everything, but I see his point. But he was right on the money when he said, a guy who builds his own rocket in his garage about to jump a mile is pretty cool. It's the most interesting human interest story in the world." But as interesting as Mike's human interest story is, do not try this at home. I know that I admire Mike a lot, but for the love of God, do not try and pick up where he left off. I know that it's very obvious to anyone with 2 brain cells to rub together, but without a disclaimer, at least one of you idiots will probably try something stupid and get yourselves killed. And I don't want that on my conscience. So I am telling all of you now, do not build a homemade rocket in your garage and try and blast off in it. Some people might think that's a little weird. Why is this YouTuber telling his subscribers to not blast off in a rocket? Because my subscribers are not like other subscribers. Right? I've met a lot of you in person and you're all fucking nutters. So, yes, I do feel the need to tell all of you to not blast off in your own homemade rockets. I've met you, I know you, and I know for a fact there will be those among you who would probably fucking try that. That said, however, no amount of safetyism, red tape, and nagging will stop the 1 in a million who are truly mad enough to go out and do it. For legal reasons, I disavow. But at the same time, I salute those people. It's that sort of wild, adventurous spirit that compelled great men to build giant wooden tubs and massive contraptions for the purpose of saying, fuck it, let's see what happens. Leading to the Age of Exploration and the Industrial Revolution. Sure, a lot of ships foundered and many boilers exploded along the way, but that's the cost of pursuing greatness. This is the Faustian spirit that conquered frontiers and built empires. This is how the West was won. We owe everything we have to batshit insane pioneers and adventurers, and the world is a less exciting and colourful place without eccentric mad bastards blasting off in gizmos and doohickeys. Science has progressed to a point where there is too little left to explore, and everything is far too sleek and far too safe. Where's the adventure? The sense of wonder? Is Elon's space Tesla really the best that we can do? Why didn't we get Tom Cruise to shoot the Martian on location? You know he would have done it. I suppose that's just the burden that comes with living in the winter of civilization. We were born too late to explore the world and too early to purge the Xenos across the stars. But in the meantime, at least we have daredevils and adrenaline junkies like Mad Mike Hughes to carry the flame, to keep the indomitable human spirit alive and remind us of who we are.
It's Count Dankula on YouTube. Everybody should subscribe.